I got news for you. Your dynasty strategy is not going to go exactly how you think it should go. So, today I have some players that you can pivot to. If you don't get your preferred target, don't worry. I have some dynasty pivots, some players to target later in your dynasty startup drafts that will help you win your leagues as soon as this year, definitely down the road. So, let's get started. The first dynasty pivot, I want to talk about the Green Bay Packers offense because I want exposure to the Green Bay Packers on my dynasty team. So I'm specifically targeting the wide receivers. Jaden Reed is the player that's ranked the highest on Keep Trade Cut at the wide receiver position. He's player 78 overall, wide receiver 31 on Keep Trade Cut. Christian Watson is number 2. He's player number 103 overall, wide receiver 40 overall. And then Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs. Dontavian Wicks, 135 overall, wide receiver 52 on Keep Trade Cut. And the reason that I want to target Green Bay Packers wide receivers is because this is a highly efficient offense that is modeled after the Kyle Shanahan scheme. Last season, Jordan Love ranked number 5 in pass attempts, number 3 in deep balls, number 2 in red zone attempts amongst quarterbacks. Love also ranked number 2 in the NFL in touchdowns thrown. And while Green Bay was middle of the pack in pace of play, number 16 in the NFL, they might decide to pick up the pace in Love's second year under center. Even if they decide to stay neutral in terms of pace of play, the Packers are still going to be an efficient offense, and taking chances on some of their top pass catchers is wise in dynasty startups. And the most expensive option, like I said, is Jaden Reed. But if you miss out on Jaden Reed, who's wide receiver 31, he's not terribly expensive. There are still some good options that you should consider. I think Christian Watson is one of the more undervalued wide receivers this year because if you remember last year, he was a 3rd or 4th round redraft pick, a 4th or 5th round dynasty startup pick, maybe a little bit later than that in superflex leagues. I don't know if I heard a negative word about Christian Watson other than from me because I was very skeptical about could this offense be good with Jordan Love? Turns out it was, but it also turned out Christian Watson couldn't stay healthy. Now he's identified the problem, his hamstring, and he's working to correct it. And now his ADP's right. He's wide receiver 40 in Dynasty, and he's still a young player. Okay, you don't like Christian Watson. What about Dontavian Wicks? Dontavian Wicks at player number 135 overall, wide receiver 52 on Keep Trade Cut, has the upside that we're looking for, has the size, has the speed, in an offense, like we mentioned, that's going to be good. You're going to want to target Packers. And this goes all the way to Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. You just want pieces of this offense because it's going to be efficient. It's going to move as fast as we want it to. And they're going to score touchdowns. And they're going to throw touchdowns with Jordan Love. So you're going to want pieces of the Packers offense. And it's a great pivot point in Dynasty. If you don't get Jaden Reed, don't worry. There's Dontavian Wicks. There's Christian Watson. And if you like Romeo Doubs, there's Romeo Doubs, even though I'm not the biggest fan. Let's shift to Kansas City, all right? So Xavier Worthy is number 75 overall, wide receiver 29, according to Keep Trade Cut. We won't talk about Rashee Rice because I feel like he's an obvious buy at this point in the Dynasty offseason. Who knows what's going to happen with him, but he's player number 84, wide receiver 32. That's, to me, an obvious buy because we don't necessarily need to be the moral police. Something is going to happen to Rashee Rice. Roger Goodell will decide that. He's likely going to see a 6 to 8 game suspension, but after that, he's probably going to go right back to being Rashee Rice. But we won't talk about him any more than that. But Marquise Brown is the dynasty pivot that I want to talk about here. He's player number 125, wide receiver 49, according to Keep Trade Cut. And I get it. I love Xavier Worthy just as much as the next guy. He looks to be the future wide receiver, featured wide receiver in Kansas City. Worthy is certainly the wide receiver the Chiefs have invested the most amount of draft capital in. However, he's likely going to be very difficult to acquire in dynasty startup drafts because of the Chiefs factor, because of the 4-2-1 40-yard dash. So if Worthy comes off the board sooner than he should, and he probably will, let's be honest, why not pivot to Marquise Hollywood Brown? Sure, he's only under contract for 1 year in Kansas City, but throughout his career, he has proven that wide receiver 49 is his floor, not where he should be drafted in Dynasty. Over the past 3 seasons, Brown has ranked as the wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game in 2021, wide receiver 27 in fantasy points per game in 2022, and the wide receiver 49 last year in 2023 in fantasy points per game. He's also earned at least 100 targets in 4 out of his 5 NFL seasons. And I got news for you. If he earns 100 targets with the Chiefs, he's going to finish as a top 36 wide receiver at the floor. Currently, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 49 in Dynasty startups, according to Keep Trade Cuts Dynasty Superflex rankings, and that's drafting him at his floor. And additionally, he's just 27 years old, so he's not the oldest player in the world. So the Chiefs could decide, hey, this guy performed really well. We want to bring him back. I mean, he's head and shoulders above Kadarius Toney with a similar skill set, so why wouldn't they? It is very difficult to acquire an elite wide receiver, and there is no question that Amon-Ra St. Brown is an elite wide receiver. Currently, St. Brown is coming off the board as player number 9 overall and wide receiver 4 in a Dynasty Superflex startup, according to Keep Trade Cut. That is very rich. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that's too rich for me. If a Dynasty gamer selects St. Brown that high in a Dynasty startup draft, it means that they would be selecting him over players like Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams. And like I said, that's not a move that I would make personally, especially in a Superflex league. However, the next best way to get exposure to this ultra-talented Detroit Lions team is to take the wide receiver 2 in the offense, and that's Jameson Williams, because Jameson Williams at player number 123, wide receiver 48, according to Keep Trade Cut, is an ultimate value, despite how you feel about him, because he's going to get that opportunity, because this offseason for the Detroit Lions was a ringing endorsement of how the Lions feel about Williams. The Lions didn't add a wide receiver of note to compete with him and let Josh Reynolds walk out the door in free agency. So the wide receiver 2 job in Detroit is Williams to lose. And while he's likely going to have ups and downs, the ups could be extremely nice. And he's very flexible. He's very, just put him in your flex, see what happens. He could give you a 2 or 3 point game, but he could give you a 25-point game. One of the premier offenses to target this offseason, and for, it's obvious, it's the Atlanta Falcons. Many Dynasty gamers, including myself, believe this is finally going to be the year for some of these Atlanta pass catchers. Gone is Marcus Mariota. Enter Kirk Cousins and the newly drafted Michael Penix Jr. Cousins should be the starter right away, and therefore should provide plenty of accurately thrown footballs in the direction of Drake London and Kyle Pitts. However, London is very expensive. Currently, Drake London is ranked as the player number 29 overall, wide receiver 10 overall, in Keep Trade Cuts Dynasty Superflex rankings. The first pivot point is Kyle Pitts, but he's still being drafted relatively high. Currently, Pitts is being drafted as player number 58, tight end 5 off the board, according to Keep Trade Cut. And out of those two options, I prefer Pitts. I happen to believe that Pitts is the better player at his position, pound for pound, talent for talent. He's better than Drake London, at least to me. But what if both came off the board sooner than they should? Because they probably will, because this is a hot offense. Not to fear, because Darnell Mooney is here. Mooney was added in the offseason and paid a handsome 3-year, $39 million contract with $26 million guaranteed. That's not bad for a wide receiver who was barely targeted 60 times over the past 2 seasons. But in a world where wide receivers are held in high regard, right? Perhaps this contract isn't that big of a deal. I can already hear it being explained away by somebody, Barney at the bar saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. They can likely get out of this deal like within a year or two. Like, no, it's not really that much. But it is a big deal because Mooney is going to be the wide receiver 2, the option 3 in the offense in a passing game that's going to crank up the volume. Mooney will likely be used as a field stretcher as well, and that is going to help Drake London. It's going to help Kyle Pitts. However, there's going to be games where Mooney will steal the show. That's because Mooney excels deep down the field, and guess where Kirk Cousins excels? Deep down the field. My guess is that Mooney is going to earn about 100 targets in this offense, and he's going to have multiple spike weeks that's going to help your dynasty team in 2024. And currently, he's player number 225, wide receiver 81, according to Keep Trade Cut. That is criminal. The last situation here I want to talk about, the last pivot point for Dynasty, and we covered 5 of them today, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We have Mike Evans, we have Chris Godwin. We have Mike Evans being ranked as the player number 87, wide receiver 34, according to Keep Trade Cut. We have Chris Godwin coming in at player number 105, overall, wide receiver 42, according to Keep Trade Cut. This one's simple, but true. Mike Evans scored 13 touchdowns last season. Chris Godwin scored 2 touchdowns. That likely won't happen again. Something's got to give. The touchdown regression is going to happen for Mike Evans, most likely. Might not happen, but is most likely to happen. Also, Mike Evans is past the age of 30 and is going to turn 31 years old this year. Chris Godwin's 28, so he's younger and he's cheaper in Dynasty. And it doesn't make much sense, especially considering Evans earned just 4 more targets in the offense last season. The obvious difference between the two players, as we mentioned, were the touchdowns, and that is likely going to regress back to the mean. Both Evans and Godwin look to be solid players to add to your Dynasty teams this season. This is because they're going to be playing with Baker Mayfield again, who ranked number 7 amongst quarterbacks in pass attempts last season, 566 pass attempts. He was number 1 in deep ball attempts, 79 deep ball attempts. That's likely why Mike Evans went berserk some weeks. Mayfield also ran the offense at an efficient pace. The Buccaneers ranked number 13 in pace of play amongst all 32 NFL teams, and there is some uncertainty about the new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohn. However, he comes from the Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay tree, and has experience within that system, as does Baker Mayfield. So given the state of the offense, this should be a team that cranks up the passing volume yet again this year, which is going to mean big years for both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But if you miss out on Mike Evans, Chris Godwin is right around the corner, and he's younger, and like I said, cheaper. So don't be afraid to pivot to Chris Godwin this year. So those are just some Dynasty pivot points that you can make. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what some of your Dynasty pivot points are going to be, some players that you're looking to target later in Dynasty startup drafts as those are progressing. Maybe they're going to start here later in July. But let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and you can follow me on Twitter at Seth_DIEWOLD. And until next time, be good, everybody, and we will see you later.